Good morning, good afternoon, whatever time of day it is that you are listening, folks. Thank you very, very much for listening. Today is the 18th of October, year of our Lord 2024. Welcome to yet another edition of The Going Hour, hosted by Nicholas Hinkle, a.k.a. Motown Noah. Got a weird show for you guys today. No idea how this one's going to go. Similar to, wasn't it literally just the last episode that I started it, and I was like, I don't know how this one's going to go. So put on your seatbelts, because we're going to do some off-road podcasting. That might end up being the case today, too. But you know what we do here at The Coping Hour? We leave it all in the show. And we do the full 60 minutes, and we cover all the biggest stories, and we cover them from all angles. So what's the big story that I want to talk about up top? I don't know, man. I've been chewing on this one for like a week, and I just haven't figured out the right way to package it in a really concise way that would be digestible or interesting. And I still don't think I've been able to achieve that. And I don't know if I will be able to achieve that in the segment that we're about to do. Maybe better for me to have somebody to like bounce off of with this or something. But what I want to talk about here, folks, is that the podcasting universe sneaky kind of shifting the tides on an election. And I don't necessarily mean in terms of, Trump going on Andrew Schultz and doing Flagrant or doing Theo Vaughn or, whoever it is that he just did Bussin' with the Boys, or the inverse being Kamala Harris going on like a Call Her Daddy or a Howard Stern, which for all intents and purposes, Howard Stern, not like a left-wing podcaster. The argument to be made there it's not even an argument. It's just what's true. He's pretty much the last remaining titan of industry in capital R radio. You know what I mean? But for all intents and purposes, it's still kind of unprecedented in a sense, because you would maybe see a presidential candidate during like the primaries go on a show like that, or a podcast in general. Like Andrew Yang, remember when he was like doing podcasts because he was like kind of trying to, even Bernie went on Rogan. You know what I mean? Like when they're still trying to get their footing and they're trying to sway voters in that way, yeah, you'll see it happen, but not when they're like the nominee. And so the reason that it's interesting to me, or rather maybe I should finish that point, I don't think that these candidates going on these podcasts is going to swing an election in terms of the actual votes themselves, but rather it's the registration bump that I think has been so interesting, because there's like empirical data to suggest that these two candidates going out there on these shows and getting the word out about who they are as a person, or, what concepts of plans that they have. There is, again, like real life data to suggest that it's getting people to register. And so, again, even if it doesn't impact the votes or the winner specifically, more people, it sounds like, are going to be voting than ever before. We say it every election cycle, right? But wasn't it the last time in 2020 that actually did end up being true, because people were their brains were in a fucking pretzel from 2016. And, a lot of people who didn't vote in 2016 were like, okay, we can never do that again. And so people came out in droves, right? But the interesting part about that is like the ones that Kamala's doing and the ones that Trump are doing, like they're just going on their like media adjacent podcasts. You know what I mean? Like somebody who listens to Bussin' with the Boys, the odds are that they're a Trump supporter, right? That's the demo. Someone who listens to Call Her Daddy, the overwhelming odds are that they are a Kamala Harris. So you know what I mean? Like they're not going on these shows to really sway people to vote for them. Like that, you know what I mean? That doesn't really seem like it's the point. But what's interesting to me here is that it's a fascinating reflection of where we're at in our digital culture, in our audio culture, where, podcasts have been around for rounding up, rounding down, like 20 years-ish. But in the last 10 is when they've really picked up speed. They were taxiing for the first 10. They got to the runway in like 2013. And then by 2016, we were in the air. We reached a steady cruising altitude by 2019. I would argue COVID absolutely murdered whatever podcasts should have been. And we went to an entirely different medium. Like the vertical just gets flipped on its head when everybody is in it. The equipment doesn't cost that much. But what we're seeing is that when you look at like audio and you look at I don't want to call it a bubble because that would be really annoying for me, but I'm just going to say it because I can't think of another word. This podcasting moment is what we'll say, and how it rivals what we view as mainstream media. It's interesting. I think the reason that these candidates are going on podcasts instead of doing... Now, Kamala did just do Colbert, so maybe this point is sort of stupid, but instead of doing like that, like late night TV, which is what it was conventionally, or I don't know, just doing like a shit ton of town halls or something, which I guess Trump did. And then the other day, and I guess it just went really poorly. I don't know. But we're seeing them go on podcasts because more people listen to podcasts than they do watch the 5 o'clock news, the 6 o'clock news. You know, what's going on in your area, your local Fox affiliate, you're probably not really tuning in, but the odds are that you listened to at least 30 minutes of a podcast today. If you didn't do that, then you probably consumed some short form content, whether it was TikTok, IG Reels, YouTube Shorts. You watched a breakout, a 5 to 7 minute long breakout of, you know, Trump talking about almost buying the Bills when he was on Bussin' with the Boys. Something like that, right? Like that's where we consume information. And the overwhelming majority of people from like 15 to 35 at this point are consuming their information through social media. And that's where all of these clips live. So it's interesting, again, the impact that it's having, you know, while at the same time it being kind of annoying to me. Because, and I'm talking more specifically about like athlete podcasts. I'm not mad at the common person picking up a microphone, you know, plugging in the old USB, firing up the camera. I can't be mad at you about it because, hey, I do it. You know, I started doing it a couple years ago. What was it, like 2017 was the first time that I started doing it. And so, you know, we all got to start somewhere. But my problem has more so just become the oversaturation of athlete content where like Bleacher Report picks up like a Debo Samuel podcast. Who the fuck cares? Right? And you can tell me that it's about expanding their vocation. I'm not really here to pocket watch and say like, well, do they really need the money? No, they don't. But that's also not really the point that I'm trying to make here. If I wanted to make that point, I would point at like a Travis Kelce or a Jason Kelce and them getting to sell their podcast for $100 million to Amazon. Amazon just like sneaky kind of in last place with the whole audio thing and them being like, oh yeah, we're actually in the podcasting business now. And since now we're also going to be streaming NBA games, we already have NFL games. Do they have baseball and hockey yet? I'm not sure. They technically have some soccer games. Like they were just a little bit behind on audio. Somehow Wave keeping the production rights in that deal, I think is the most interesting thing. That Amazon is going to distribute it, but Wave still gets to produce it. I don't know. What we're starting to see is like not all of these guys have that much to say. They don't. And how many of these podcasts do you know that they exist? Like, you know, oh yeah, like that dude has a podcast, but you've never sat down for a full episode. You've never sat down for more than 10 minutes. We talk about short form content. Like that's the only way that you consume it. Jeff Teague, for me, his podcast started that way, where I would just consume that, you know, a couple months ago, I would just like consume that. It wasn't that long ago that that's not the point, dude. But like when his show first came out, I would consume like the short form shit. And I was just like, wow, this is actually really funny. And then eventually they start getting like important guests. I watched the full Derrick Rose episode that he just did the other day with his boys. It was awesome. Like that's a great show. And some people you can kind of tell that I was on a roll. Like, I think the reason that Jeff Teague is good at it is just because he's just hanging out and he's just kind of shooting the shit. And he's a very naturally gifted storyteller. You know, where some of these other guys, it's like you have a podcast because you know that it's lucrative and because you got it, but you don't have anything insightful to say. You just have really interesting relationships with people. And so that means that you can get bigger guests. And so that means that more people, like your click-through rate and your viewer retention is going to be a lot better, right? Which is what these media companies want. That's what the Bleacher Reports want. That's what the Bleacher Reports of the world want. That's what the Wave Sports and Entertainments of the world want. Because when you look at it in a vacuum, like what is media? It is the acquisition and the I'm taking that one from the top. Because when you look at media in a vacuum, what is it? It's the acquisition and monetization of attention. That's what it is. So it doesn't matter if the guy's actually not that interesting to listen to. But again, it goes back to the relationships and how can we expand this brand? Like you think about, who bought Hot Ones years ago? I think they ended up selling them too. But like Hot Ones is a good example. Like when they got bought, it's like, okay, this show does crazy numbers. And it's not like merch is the ground floor. Merch is one thing. Yeah, that's a really easy way to make some money. But with a show like Hot Ones, it's like, okay, we're also going to start selling these hot sauces. We're also going to do a partnership with Pringles, right? We're going to do a partnership in select cities with Shake Shack. And then people, maybe if for some reason in 2024 you didn't know what Hot Ones was, like you're going to find out and you're going to form those associations, right? And then you're going to check in on the show. And then they have your attention and they also have your money. Like that's just how this works. And so that's a big reason why you're seeing so many athletes starting podcasts. And I guess some of them are able to use their influence to such a degree that even if a presidential candidate has absolutely no business doing their show, that's where the eyes are. That's the new medium, right? Again, taking it back to the top, you're just not watching the news that often. I believe some of you are watching MSNBC. I believe some of you are watching Fox News and CNN and all the big dogs, like for sure. But what are you consuming more? And where do you get more of your news from? An overwhelming majority of you out there are going to be getting it from social media, which, by the way, isn't like a problem. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's kind of like the boogeyman of yesteryear that like, and sure, there's now you're just more prone to disinformation and yada, yada, yada. But you are more in control of the information that you receive in 2024 than anybody has ever been in their entire lives. And by the way, next year, it's going to be the same thing in 2025. I'll say the exact same thing because you'll have that much more control of it because the market will be even further saturated and there will be even more sources of information that you can pull from. And if you want to have blinders on certain topics, like you absolutely can. If you want to plug your ears and go la, 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 la to certain issues, you can absolutely do that because that is the landscape that has been created. And that is I don't really want to say a cesspool because at the end of the day, it is technically a good thing that you, again, are in control of where your attention goes. It's really the only soapbox that I will get up on and pound my chest more than anything else in the world is trying to convince people that their attention is the most valuable thing in their possession. And just because, I'm not trying to shit on Deebo Samuel. I don't know why he's the one I just keep bringing up. I could say like a Duncan Robinson or doesn't Michael Porter Jr. have a podcast? Like, don't listen to them just because of who they are. You know, and the guests that they get. Like, do you actually think that this is worth your time? A lot of the time it won't be. A lot of the time I don't think that it will be. I don't know. Hey, and then it's like, because it almost feels like this digitalization of our culture. It's like a space race of sorts. To see like who's going to burst it first. Like what's going to happen. Because Rogan's kind of, it's interesting the inflation of numbers that you would hear coming from Spotify. Like Rogan's doing crazy numbers. At once upon a time, he absolutely was. But then you look at, now they start uploading on YouTube again. And the reason that they started doing that, you would assume, is because the numbers started to drop on Spotify. The numbers on YouTube are weird. They're like really, really weird. And so now people like are maybe starting to care a little bit less about Rogan. And there's something to be said about maybe the comedians that he harbors and that he shelters. And I'm not talking about like Shane Gillis, but like the Burt Kreischers and the Tom Seguras. Like there's a whole thing about them right now about how they're just like pieces of shit and how Two Bears. I don't care enough about this at all to even bring this up. So this is not me bringing it up. Although, who's going to burst the podcast bubble first? That's not a space race. The real space race, oh my God, in 2024, you know what it is, the modern day space race? It's quantum computing. It has to be, right? Now, I'm going to open up a whole can of worms that I hardly even understand. But at the elementary level that I can kind of describe it, it's scary. It's pretty scary. Because right now, IBM, I think, is the leader for the United States, wherever their facility is, where they have these quantum computers that they're working on, these prototypes that they're working on. And then China is the other big player in this. All major tech players in the world are in on this, right? And the implications of, and federal governments are keeping a watchful eye on how this progress is going, right? The implications of it are what? Well, I think it was Bloomberg maybe that put out a feature about this recently that it fried my brain, but I tried really, really hard to keep along with it as best as I could. So if you think about like a normal computer that I'm recording this on right now, that some of you might be watching this on right now, doing your work, whatever it is. You know, you can get that computer to try to solve a maze. And what that computer is going to do is it's going to go through like every single possible route that it could go. And it could figure it out in 10 seconds. It could be 10 minutes. It could be 10 years until it figures out the right path and the right, what am I trying to say? You get what I'm saying, right? But quantum computing, you say, hey, find And before you even finish it, it's able to figure it out. And so an implication of that would be incurable diseases as we know them in 2024, gone. They're gone because they can figure that out. Bypassing encryption immediately, like it's nothing, like cutting like a hot knife through butter. Encrypted messages, gone. Encrypted anything, gone with quantum computing. And so that's a reason why federal governments are let me just finish the point. That's another reason why federal governments are keeping such a close eye on this. And you have such a hard time, like you could accurately predict weather data. I was talking to a guy about this the other day. He was telling me about it, kind of went over my head, but that's another thing. And so you just wonder, well, okay, so some of this stuff sounds kind of cool. Some of it sounds kind of scary. And you just wonder, not to be the whole like, oh man, capitalism is such a bitch, isn't it? Man, capitalism is a bitch, ain't it? Not to be like that annoying guy. Like, even if it's true, like we've just all heard it a million times, and the worst person you've ever met in your life, like that's their whole deal. It's like their whole personality. It's just annoying to me personally. You just have a hard time believing that this wouldn't be used for the worst because of that. Is it even federal governments that you have to be worried about? I don't know. Yeah, for sure. What about like weapons manufacturers? That'd be pretty scary. That'd be pretty not good. So even if there are things like solving incurable diseases, there's been the whole conspiracy out there for my entire life that the cure for cancer actually does exist, but that it is way more lucrative for these pharmaceutical companies. Can I do an impromptu Bernie impression? Bigfoot. No, I'm not going to be able to do it. But it's way too lucrative for these pharmaceutical companies to actually make it public because they make so much damn money on like chemotherapy, and I don't know. That one always feels kind of dangerous and is a little too hits a little too close to home, and that's one that, believe it or not, I don't like to speculate on, of all things. So if you did have quantum computing to sort of solve that, maybe I don't know, wouldn't work out. Between that and like the AI boom, augmented reality like slowly getting in the mix, Meta announcing the Orion glasses that they came out with. Sure, they look a little bit goofy. SNL Weekend Update made a joke about them looking like the Minions goggles, but they're cool, right? They're cool. There's a skeletal version of them that exists in the Meta HQ, and you can see all of the computing power that goes in those little specs, all in those little tiny frames. And it's fascinating. Now, what's confusing to me is that I'm still trying to figure out what the difference is between that and the Vision Pro, because it seems like right now Orion has like shittier UI and has shittier AI capabilities, but like the field of view looks like it might be kind of better, and like you can play like games with, but I'm like the scrolling, everything, like a lot of it is the same thing. And I think where Meta has it right with these AR glasses is not letting them go public and just being like, hey, we're going to keep these in-house and we'll do like controlled demos, like privately. And I think another Bloomberg feature actually is what I was watching recently, where a guy went to the HQ and with Mark Zuckerberg was testing them out. They looked cool. And I think it's good that Meta is dumping a bunch of money into augmented reality. I mean, the VR thing kind of slowly came along, and is that like a I don't want to play with you anymore .jpeg? Did we already move to augmented reality? What's going on with VR? Do people still care about that? You know, AI has come a long way in the last 3 years, but even talking about artificial intelligence is just another one of those things that is kind of annoying to me, because not to be like a loser, but dog, we were talking about that how many years ago, and then the word became a buzzword, a buzz term for people. And now that's like when people talk about it, it's like their concept of it is a little bit fucked up, myself included, by the way. Even when I was talking about it when I was in like high school, I didn't really understand it. And now that it's actually here and it's such a prominent, I mean, Thursday Night Football is about to happen as we're taping this, and that happens on Prime. And they have AI integration with like real-time stat keeping and shit like that, and like predictive pressure. You know, you watch these games and they'll put a little ring around somebody who is kind of shaded to one side, and they're like, we think this guy's going to bring some pressure. That's a computer doing that. That's a script doing that. That's really interesting. But you just wonder, like, how much more invasive can all of this technology get? You know, these algorithms that are being developed, we talk about social media, these algorithms that are being developed are only getting smarter, and they're only getting more intuitive. Like, yes, some of it is that your devices listen to you. I don't know how many more lawsuits have to come out where companies are accused of this and it's proven that they are doing it before it's like, that's just what happens. Because I was reading a whole thing on Reddit the other day, which no, Reddit is not real life, but it is still a reflection of some people that exist, no matter how small the bubble is, where they're like, oh, people are like people who think that they can't trust this tech company or this tech company because they're, fuck, I should have not even brought this up because I don't remember what it was. It's all invasive though. Right? I totally derailed it. Let's move on to something else, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, JB Bickerstaff, you seen this? You heard about this? He had a quote that made the rounds the other day. I'm not going to pull it up. But he said something to the effect of, yeah, we're not wearing hoodies in practice. We're not going to do that around here because you're not wearing hoodies in the game. What do you need to practice in that for? Keeping that shred of old school alive. Got a couple emails from you guys. Nick, what do you think about this? Ooh, Nick, some of you didn't like it. Some of you did like it. Let's talk about it. I love it. I love it from him. I think what's interesting is it is the closest that JB Bickerstaff will get to having a biting their kneecaps off Dan Campbell adjacent quote in his rookie season, in his first season as the Pistons coach, right? Where we either look back on that and we're like, see, he said this thing at the beginning of his tenure to shape a culture and to have the players use it as a proverbial touchstone, the same way that Dan Campbell did with the biting kneecaps comment. And now everybody still loves to talk, well, man, we all thought he was crazy. Y'all thought he was crazy. You know what I mean? Or if things get rocky and the Pistons don't look good, we'll laugh about that shit because we're like, what was that guy even talking about? Oh, you can't wear hoodies at practice because you can't wear them in the game? Who cares? Right? But it's about a coach who's at least trying to establish some culture that isn't losing culture. By the way, Monty Williams, you fucking thief. Because he was like, man, we lost a whole year of Jaden Ivey. Because he was like, no, Killian Hayes, NBA player. We have to close this game with Killian Hayes. And then the team would like suck. And Monty was like, what? Like surprised Pikachu.jpg? The fuck is going on in Detroit? Oh, what's my game check? $85,000. Thanks, Tom Gores. Thanks, Troy Weaver. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's a good quote. Liked hearing that from him. Got Braid Cunningham in the mix at this point. I think that was what was going on. I only saw a video from him in practice from like super far away. The Pistons played another preseason game. Thank God the preseason is over. So that motherfuckers will stop being like, Nick, whoa, what do you think about the Pistons in the preseason? Don't know. I keep saying it in like every episode. I'm like, I'm not watching the preseason. But still, every game that the Pistons play, oh, Nick, you seen this? No. Nope. Don't care. Don't have time to watch the games when they don't matter and they don't count. Oh, but Nick, the Pistons looked really good. And then what if they don't in the regular season? What if they don't? Then I spent the preseason being like, I don't know, keep an eye on this Pistons team. Which, by the way, I'm already saying. I don't need to watch the games in order to think that. Like, wake me up when the games actually count. Which, a week from now... Oh, yeah, this is a fun way to look at it, actually. A week from now, we'll be talking about the Pistons and, like, the NBA regular season, getting into full swing. The Monday episode, we'll do a recap of all of the weekend football. And then the next time, again, that you hear from me, a week from today, we'll be talking about actual hoops. Wow, that's really exciting. So what do you say we do, like, a rapid fire of a bunch of different emails? copinghoursubs@gmail.com. Spelled phonetically. Email available in the description wherever it is that you listen to this program. Shout out to the guy who emailed a couple hours ago and was like, the Bunny Cardigan show was better than this. Thank you for listening, man. Thanks for being a longtime listener. This one came into us from JP. JP, welcome to the show. Good morning, Nick. As many say, longtime listener, first-time emailer, I've been trying mentally to manifest a perfect email to send in. And for the past few months, I'm currently trying to find the words or write something interesting to say. And I realized something. This is a start, parenthetically. Hope that doesn't come off as ominous. It shouldn't. Fuck it. This is a good first email to send. Sincerely and with much appreciation for everything, JP. Nick, or rather, you're probably wondering, Nick, why the hell did you read that on the show? It's bizarre email, right? This is a guy who just needed that first email under his belt just so that he could say, yeah, I've emailed the show before. And then they did it, and it had nothing to do with anything. It was just more like self-serving, like, hey, yeah, I email into the show. And you get those shots up. I just wanted to highlight that. Thanks for that. Got one from Brian. Subject line, Bleacher Report in their coping hour bag. And it's just a screenshot from Instagram. Brian, welcome to the show. And it says, how many future Hall of Famers are in the NBA right now? I don't know, Bleacher Report. We already did that on this show. Catch up. That was what, like episode maybe in like the 60s? Dog, in the middle of us doing that, we did the Eastern Conference. And then I think it was the Western Conference episode back in July that we did these two episodes back to back. Before we started doing the who was in the Hall of Fame in the Western Conference, Donald Trump almost got shot in the head, and they said he got shot in the ear. He did not. He just didn't. I said it at the time, and my flag is still firmly planted in this, that it was like maybe a piece of shrapnel from the glass on the teleprompter, but there's zero fucking chance. And like they had the ability to milk that, and he must have just gotten too tired of like being in the makeup chair with like the fucking Band-Aid and shit for like too long, and then he was just one day was like, oh yeah, actually my ear's completely fine. So which is it, Donald? Is it that the ear actually bleeds the most? It's the part of the body that actually bleeds the most. There are many such cases of people saying that the ear produces the most blood from your body, but then like a week later he was like, no, like my shit is completely fine. Yeah, like it didn't make the threat any less real, but that motherfucker did not get shot in the head. Bleacher Report, catch up. Y'all are late. If you need tips, I have a really good content brain. You know, this show, you could buy the show if you want. We could, and I can get ahead of all these for you. This one comes into us from James. James, welcome to the show. Catching up plus question. Hey, Nick, been a hot minute since my last email. I've had some ideas in this time, but I feel like I've missed my window for the Timberwolves take. Long story short, I think the lineup flexibility they have now means they actually did get better. I just love the DiVincenzo piece for them. So whatever that means for your lineup flexibility, if we're on the same page, then I agree with you. But if we're talking about two different things, then I like Dante DiVincenzo a lot. Back to the email. And it never feels like a good time to get my shit off regarding John Stockton. Another summary here. Now that it's cool to hate on him because of his shit politics and the fact that he was once overrated, I think he's actually becoming underrated. I wish I had something for you. I don't care. He played before I was alive. I don't care that much about the history of the game. I care about what is in front of me right now. I don't care how we got to this point. I just care where we're going. Does that make sense? You might be right, though. You might be right. And his politics are very funny. Sneaky should have been on the pyramid of dumb. Like, Sneaky. We didn't put that many anti-vaxxers on there, I don't think. Was there even one? I don't know. Because we ended up having to add Mike. Oh, right. Michael Porter Jr. was the one that you guys were like, you have to add him because he's anti-vax. Can you have two anti-vaxxers on the list? There's a question for the peanut gallery. The Coping Tower and NBA Pyramid of Dumb. I'm pretty sure, again, that Michael Porter Jr. was the only anti-vax guy on there. Might be wrong. Pretty sure that was the case. John Stockton has to be on there, though. Back to the email again. The actual point of the email today is the following. What is your thought process for determining the current star player who is definitely a future Piston that never becomes one? It was Jaylen Brown when I started paying attention to you. It's Devin Booker now. And people are asking. You didn't write this. I'm just doing the impression. And people are asking. Many people are asking. There are many such cases of people asking, is it just the vibes or is there a particular rationale to it? Now, James, the reason this email stood out to me is because I have fucking no idea when I would have said that Jaylen Brown is going to be a Piston someday. I suspect, however, it would have been on the Bun and Cardigan show, and that may as well have been 10 years ago. So I don't remember why I would have said it. What I can tell you is I meant it, and my logic was probably airtight, even if it didn't end up happening. The Devin Booker thing is super cut and dry. He's from Grand Rapids. I've done the Matt Ishbia's Just Joseph Tsai 2.0 thing a million times at this point. The band is going to break up. They will divorce him. They're going to want a young, score-punchy guard. We have one of those at home wearing 23. Detroit maybe gets into a spot. They got some extra money. That's why they didn't spend all of it this summer, so that they could facilitate a trade for somebody like this. you go get a Devin Booker to kind of accelerate your timeline a little bit. Look, I don't think it's that crazy. I don't think it's going to happen this year, but at some point it will, for sure. For sure. How many more goddamn pictures and videos do I need to see of Devin Booker getting some tunnel fits off and he's wearing like a Wings sweater or a Tigers hat, or he's in the Breslin Center warming up for a game wearing Michigan State shorts? The guy wants to come home more than anything in the world. Brother, he was almost drafted here. Like, he thought he was going to be drafted here. He did a workout for Detroit. There are pictures of it. There's video of it. It was caught in 4K. It was not 4K. It was maybe like 720p. So that's it. Again, I don't remember what it would have been. I think you know what our logic would have been with Jaylen Brown? James and I probably agreed that the culture that Detroit was so proud of building and embracing was they had a black GM, a black head coach. They, like, all of their beat reporters were black. They were like embracing the reflection of the team and its media, like, again, being a reflection of the city and its culture. That was like a big thing for them. And then at the time, Jaylen Brown was kind of making the rounds for just like being proud of like what he looked like and what the color of his skin was. So I think maybe we just hypothesized that at the time, if the Jays were going to break up, that like, I guess it would make sense that he would want to come to Detroit, a team that like, a franchise that embraces their heritage in a major way. I don't know. That's probably what we said about it. Which, is that airtight? It's kind of weird, but it made sense at the time. It's not that weird. It made sense. It's just kind of like what Jaylen Brown, that was like his whole deal, at least online for a while, was. The Booker thing, no, I just explained it. Is it vibes beyond that? I mean, like, yeah, like Devin Booker. I completely take back the Jaylen Brown thing. Like, he's never coming to Detroit. But again, that was years ago that we said that, and there was just more information. I've been saying the book thing for... when did Matt Ishbia take over? Since then is when I said it. And he did the Kevin Durant thing, and I was like, oh, fuck. Yeah, they're screwed. This is over. This is hashtag not happening at all. It's like the reverse Ozempic of Mark Wahlberg's The Happening. This is hashtag not happening. So, James, thank you very much for the email. This one comes into us from Paul. Subject line, random NBA players popping off. Paul, welcome to the show. Hey, Nick, I've been watching since the closet days. And since the Coping Hour started, I've always thought about emailing, but never had a good question. This might not be a good question, but the story is all right. All right. Let's judge for ourselves, Paul. A couple years ago, I went to my first Pistons game, and I loved telling my dad everything about the player. I'm sorry. Let me restart that. A couple of years ago, I went to my first Pistons game, and I loved telling my dad everything about every player doing warm-ups. And then I saw Sekou Doumbouya. I had no idea who he was. This ended up being an awesome overtime win against the Nuggets led by Sekou. He hit like 5 threes in a row and finished with at least 20 points. After this game, I thought Sekou was the shit. He never really did anything, and it bummed me out. My question is, do you have a time that you saw a random player go off and got super attached to them only for them to do nothing? Additional Pistons take. Andre Drummond was the best player. Oh, my God. Okay, Paul, you sent in a good email here. Before I read what you're about to say, folks, when I said at the beginning of the show, I think I said this, to put your seatbelts on, put your motherfucking seatbelt on. Additional Pistons take. Andre Drummond was the best player on that Blake Griffin-led Pistons team and doesn't get enough credit for how great he was in Detroit. Paul, you're an awesome guy. I would love to get a beer with you. You seem like an awesome guy. It's a horrible take. Such a bad take. No, he wasn't. No, and man, I'm so tired of that. And you didn't technically say this, but the people who are like, man, Andre was set up to fail in Detroit. My ass, he was set up to fail in Detroit. What was he ever going to do? What was he ever going to do? He, like, never adapted to the way that he probably should have played. I mean, like, sure, we could have, like, gotten him a point guard and stopped, like, drafting players that couldn't shoot the fucking ball. Like, I guess. But we went and got Reggie Jackson, and he was a stabilizer. Like, he wasn't bad. Dog, if you think the Pistons sucked when Andre Drummond was here, they would have been a lot worse for the, 2 years that Blake actually played while he was here. We damn sure would not have gone to the playoffs. We didn't even win 41. Did we go 40 and 42, or did we go 41 and 41 that year that we went to the playoffs? Blake Griffin did that. He did that. And so that was also the same year that he was third team All-NBA, hit the most threes he's ever hit in his fucking life, was an all-star. And if he wasn't on the team, we probably would have won, 25 games? I don't think it's that crazy to say that Blake Griffin won us at least 16 games that year. If I went back and looked, if I really got nitpicky, I could probably pick more. That's a crazy take. That's crazy. But just to get back to your actual email here, what's fun about this is we're actually aligned. We're actually on the same page. I maybe could think of a different one, but I've not done a Sekou Doumbouya spiel maybe ever on this show, and if I have, it's been a really long time, because, who cares? Who cares about Sekou Doumbouya? Man, so my journey with him is crazy. So at the time that we drafted him, I've told this part of the story before. When we drafted Sekou, I was writing for Piston Powered at the time, for Fansided. I was a little blogger. I was in my blog era, right? And I wanted to get ahead of the Pistons just drafted this, which, by the way, I'm pretty sure this was on the tail end of us going to the playoffs with Blake Griffin. That's why we had the 15th pick in the draft. We weren't even in the lottery. People were so pissed about that because it was the Zion draft. And I remember the Mike Valenti's of the world were like, why the fuck is this team going to the playoffs when we could have a 0.5% chance at Zion? Which, by the way, is who ended up winning the lottery. It was a team who had a 2% chance of the New Orleans Pelicans. They won 37 games, which was 3 or 4 games less than Detroit, and they ended up with Zion Williamson. Whoops. Technically, that could have been us, right? But instead, we get Sekou. So we're at pick number 8, and I start drafting my story because I already know who we're going to take. I'm the Pistons are taking Cam Johnson, and I'm writing as if it already happened, right? And then, the 10th pick comes around, fucking reach. The Suns are Cameron Johnson. I was like, whoa. And so, I'm scrambling. I think I ended up saying, I started typing, Nasir Little after that. And the Pistons finally come up. Who was it that was right before him and right after him? It was a player that I ended up hating. But, so Adam Silver gets up there, and he's talking about Sekou Doumbouya. And I did, a surrender Cobra. I was like, I was like, what? I was like, huh? Yeah, that's what it was. Okay, so Cam Johnson gets drafted to Minnesota with the 11th pick. I mean, obviously that had to have been traded to Phoenix, but that's not included here. Romeo Langford was the player I was scared of. I was like, he's not good. Please don't draft this kid. And he went 1 pick before us. He went to Boston. Tyler Hero went 13 to Miami. So who did we miss out on in the immediate? Well, let me finish the actual story that I was going to tell here. I was pissed. I was like, who the fuck is this kid? Everyone on Twitter was posting clips of him in an empty gym shooting threes with nobody around, and they were losing their minds. And there were a couple clips of him dunking, but it was he's 18 years old. Is this going to work? And, in the long run, it didn't work. But when you talk about a player who had a moment, the dunk that he had on Tristan Thompson was an all-time Pistons moment for me, a holy shit moment. Is this kid actually? Because he was just so raw. There was just not enough ability in there, and he was a deer in the headlights all the time. But, when it worked, it was fun. His jumper was, kind of cool. It looked really good when it went in, and I don't mean that to sound dumb. Man, when it goes in, it looks really good. But that is actually exactly what I mean. But it was never going to work with him. And then, the part of this that I tell is that it was the year after that we drafted Killian, and it was whoa. Killian's going to have a friend. Because they played together in, was it Germany or France? Wherever it was that they played together. They had been on the same team before. And then it was also right after we drafted Sekou. The NBA awards happened, and while it was going on, I filed a story about how Blake Griffin was arguably the MVP this year. If we're talking about a player who was actually the most valuable, this guy would have said that it was... that it was Andre Drummond from that team. But I fight Paul. That's a wild take. I respect it though, because I believe that you mean that. So I was like, okay, Blake Griffin MVP, whatever. So I filed the story, and it was 2 days later, I get hit up by ESPN Radio in Ohio. And they're like, hey, we love the story. You want to come on the show and do do 10 minutes on Blake Griffin? And I was like, oh my God. I'm a 19-year-old kid, and I'm getting asked to do ESPN Radio. I'm like, what? Yeah, dude. And it went really, really well. And it went so well that they asked me to come back 2 weeks later. And they're like, so we want to talk to you about this Sea Cow kid. And I was like, who's that? What was that? Who do you want to talk about? And so I ended up trying to educate them on how to say Sekou Doumbouya. Even nobody knew at the time. Even I was I'm pretty sure it's Sekou, but they kept saying "see cow," and I was like, chill with that. That feels like chill a little bit. I ended up being wrong. And then, it's funny. So they asked me to come on for a third time, and we were talking about Russell Westbrook, and I just bombed. Like, I just didn't do well. For one reason or another, maybe I wasn't prepped or whatever it was. Like, I was in a bad headspace. I just fucking bombed. And they didn't ask me to come back on for like 6 months. And I was like, I smoked that. Like, inside of a month, I did like 3 ESPN radio appearances, and I just fucking sucked. And then he didn't ask me to come on. And then about 6 months later, they're like, hey, the producer reaches out to me and he's like, do you want to come back on the show? And I was like, holy shit, I thought you guys hated me. He was like, no, dude, like we just hadn't done any topics where you would be like needed. And I was like, okay, cool. He goes, how's next week sound? I was like, that sounds awesome. And then about 5 days later, one of the co-hosts and the producers get me on a call. And they're like, hey, man, we're going to have to bump you from the schedule. I was like, oh, damn, like that's too bad. I was crushed. And they're like, yeah, ESPN's killing our network. I was like, oh. And the co-host just starts like going off. And he's like talking about how like fuck ESPN and blah, 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 blah. He kind of got in on the ground floor with that one, though. I saw something today. Somebody said that ESPN is turning into like the Fox News of the sports landscape. Because it's rage bait is like all that it is. And when they let go the Zach Lowe's of the world. And they're like, Kendrick Perkins like multi-year extension. I can't shit on that much because who gets clips shared of them more, Zach Lowe or Kendrick Perkins, right? You're not exactly cropping out photos of like ESPN Plus, articles from Zach Lowe. You're just not really doing that. Not really seeing any breakouts from his podcast, even if he was like really, really good at it. This isn't to disparage him. I'm just saying that ESPN clearly, like the E stands for entertainment. You know what I mean? And like what Fox News does is like propaganda, right? Oh, it's propaganda. ESPN can't exactly do that, but they can certainly do the closest thing to that, which is exactly what they do through whatever it is that they're covering. There's always a slant to it. And yeah, they have personalities who aren't slanted in that way, but for all intents and purposes. Did a couple radio hits with Doug Christie and Grant Napier. I don't know how many. 4 or 5. I don't remember how many it was. They were always great to me. They were always awesome. It was like Doug Christie was just like a cool guy. Like just a really cool guy. One time I was on a phone call with, it was me, Andre Iguodala, Damian Lee, Seth Curry, and Marquise Chris. It's just us. And it wasn't a phone call. It was like I've explained this story before, actually, maybe, so I don't need to explain it again. I just was like, why am I even here? I was asked to be there, and I didn't want to be, because I was like, this isn't what I do at all. Can we pivot a little bit? Can we just I hope you still have your seatbelt on, because I'm about to nosedive this thing. Tanking into the ground. Had a tough day today. Had a real hard day today, ladies and gentlemen. Just got torn up emotionally and mentally, physically, spiritually, all of it. Felt like I kind of got kicked down. Our son is going through some major regressions. He's almost 6 months old and he's just a disaster. It's so hard. It's so hard. He just doesn't sleep. Today he skipped 2 of his naps. He just didn't take them. He was just no, I'm not taking these naps. The first one, he was asleep. And then he just wasn't anymore. And then he was just wide awake. And I was like, oh, okay. All right, well, when when we try again in an hour or 2, you'll just be out for longer. That's cool. And then I ended up taking him on a walk because I knew that would make him go to sleep. And at that point, I was like, dude, just go to bed. And he slept for about 15 minutes. And then for 3 more hours, he was just what's going on? What can we get into? And I was like, Jesus, brother. And then at night, he just doesn't really sleep. And then he's teething. And so you try to give him some baby Orajel, but he's just always upset about something. He's always screaming about something. And it's just hard, man. It's just hard. And then it's and then I got to take a look in the mirror and I'm like, are you a bad dad? Is there something that you're doing wrong? I can sit here and I can confidently tell you, I'm giving him everything that I have. I'm showing him every ounce of love that I possibly can. It's not to say that I don't get really fucking angry sometimes, really, really real life angry. Because it's dude, he can't communicate to me like what is actually wrong. So I just have to like troubleshoot it and figure it out. That gets exhausting when you have to do it every 30 minutes. You know, as soon as you think he's calmed down, it's like, he's like, I actually have something else that I'm really fucking mad about. And I'm like, okay. And then at some point, like loud and disruptive noises, like really like not freak me out, but they like piss me off. And like, I just can't take it. So like when he's just constantly just like doing it, I think I mentioned this a couple episodes ago. He's like gaining more control of his vocal cords. So that means he can scream louder and he can laugh louder. He can do everything just a little bit louder. And it's like every single day he challenges himself to see like how much louder can he scream. And it's piercing when he does it. And sometimes it's right in my ear. And it's just a whole thing. So again, like I can sit here and I can confidently tell you like, dude, I'm not doing anything wrong. I know I'm not, but I still just feel horrible because I don't feel like I'm able to give him exactly what he needs. And then it just like puts into perspective, like, X amount of you out there are parents, and I so deeply love the messages that some of you will send me and the comments that you will leave, empathizing with my experiences or, including your own perspectives on certain things. And it really does feel like sort of a collective, okay, so you're in this too, like you're in the trenches too, or, you have a 5-year-old, so you've been here, done that. But what's crazy, what I'm getting at here is for those of you out there who have a 5-year-old, some of you have like a 10-year-old, some of you have like 45-year-olds. If you're my grandparents, you have a damn near 60-year-old. You know what I mean? 60? Yeah, oh my God. Yeah. You have a 57-year-old. You know what I mean? And so you look at people like that who have older, but for all intents and purposes, like a 5-year-old or something, right? Well, even my grandparents with a 57-year-old. And you're like, oh, so you have it figured out. Like by then you understand like parenting and like, what to do and the schedules, the routines, the cheat codes, the tricks. Even if some of that's true, it's like, no, all it does is every year that they get older is it just presents a new set of circumstances. Like by that point, yeah, you're probably more seasoned with like babies, like infants and newborns and kids and shit like that. Like, what to do, but dog, like having a 12-year-old versus having a 17-year-old, like those parents are still figuring stuff out. You know what I mean? Like they're still calling audibles. They're still figuring stuff out on the fly. That's the part of it that's crazy to me. I can look at my parents now and be like, yeah, I mean, like, we're not done growing. Your guys' kids aren't done growing. And, like, there's still things that you don't know how to deal with. Just because we're older and we're all more mature and, like, live on our own and live in different cities and, like, all this stuff, like, you still don't know. Just because you're not responsible for us anymore, you're not around us every single day. Like, man, what a very deeply human experience that is the feeling of the unknown and the uncertainty and the skepticism and the doubt that will creep in that like, maybe I'm not doing the right thing. Because I was reading something from somebody on like r/daddit the other day where he was like, my kid is 30 years old. He's like, we had one kid and it took me 30 years to realize that I should not have been a parent. He's like, I love my kid more than anything in the world, yada, yada, yada. Like a lot of the same shit that I just said, but like different, And he was like, but some people just aren't supposed to be kids. He's like, I'm too selfish and blah, blah, blah. And he started saying a bunch of shit. And honestly, despite the fact that I just said that I related to some of it, I didn't really relate to what he was saying, which made me feel better, because that is something that's kind of crept in my head. Is I was like, what if I'm just like a bad person? Like, not a bad person, but like, what if this is just like, isn't what I'm supposed to do? Like, just because I'm like really in tune with my emotions doesn't mean that it, but I think reading an experience from somebody where they were like, no, like I am selfish with my time. That is a problem that I have. And that is a compromise, a sacrifice rather that I've had to make, since he's gotten here. But it's not like I take that out on him. And it's not like I resent him for that. I'm more like mad circumstantially. Like I'm more like sometimes I get frustrated that it's like, when he doesn't nap. Sometimes when he goes down, I'm like, okay, he's going to be asleep for like an hour and a half. Even if it's only 60 minutes, I'm firing up college football, right? I'm like, okay, this is my window. I'm going to play 2 games. I'm going to do some recruiting. I'm going to spend the entire hour tweaking somebody's accessories and equipment. And then he's going to wake up and he's going to be like, all right, it's time to play with me. And I'm like, but I didn't even start playing the game yet. You guys remember that argument? The one that nobody agreed with me on? But anyways, like, yeah, that is a problem that I have, but I don't know. Because that's a big piece of it, right? One of the emails that we got recently was a guy who was like, it's hard for me not to be spending like every second with my kid. And it's hard that sometimes I feel like I'm not appreciating it while it's happening in real time and all this stuff. But what I'm learning is that it's really important that you still give yourself the time. You go out of your way to make time for you, the parent, to do the things that you are passionate about, even if it's only an hour, even if it's only 30 minutes, 45 minutes. Like, it sucks when you have to do it in short bursts. But if you're not still you, then you can't be the parent that they need. You know what I mean? You can't lose yourself in that journey. And that's something that I've really struggled with. And I think a lot of the time that's when maybe I get frustrated, is because I turn into like a zombie, where I'm just like, I have a script that I'm running, you know, and I know what buttons to push, and like, okay, this cry is milk, and this cry is discomfort, and this cry is bored, and this cry is tired, and shit like that. And isn't that crazy that, you know, for the longest time, I'm like, yeah, babies cry and they all sound the same. But then your baby starts to cry and you're like, that's my kid. You know what I mean? Like, you immediately recognize the cry. And then the other piece of that is like speaking baby cry language and being able to discern what the cry is actually telling you. It's crazy, because if somebody else's kid starts doing it, I'm just like, yeah, they're crying and they're upset about something. But if our son starts doing it, again, we could tell you exactly what it is that he probably needs in that moment. That's a bizarre feeling. Again, it's very human. It feels like primitive in some way that we're able to figure that out on the fly. I don't know. I've just been trying really hard. It's a hard day for me. That's why I didn't know how this show was going to go. It was just a really tough day for me. And yeah, I'll just leave it at that. You know, man, I finally finished Ghost of Tsushima. I've been talking about it a lot lately. I've been talking about Ghost of Tsushima a lot lately. Oh my God. Whoa. That game rules. I like actually did it, and I feel really accomplished that I beat that game. But then it's weird. Like, I look at my playtime and it's like 20 hours. Like, it's not that long. Like, oh, the story's actually not that long. Sneaky, not really. I think the reason that the first act seemed like it took so long for me was because I was doing so much other bullshit on the side. Like, I spent so long liberating all of the little towns and villages and shit like that and the forts, because I was trying to like get a grasp of the game and like figure out what I'm actually doing. So the first act took me maybe longer than it needed to, or it is actually just a little bit longer. But like, you can blitz through the second and third. The third was like 6 missions and then it's like done. But man, some of these like sieges that you do and maybe this is a bad take. Maybe this is kind of a lame take. The penultimate mission. Is that how you use that word? Where you, spoiler alert for Ghost of Tsushima, I would imagine that at this point, everybody who wanted to play the game has played the game. But if not, you know, plug your ears, use the timestamps to your advantage. Maybe this is the last thing we talk about. I have no idea. Go listen to Primary Control or something. When you kill the Khan, that mission, and you're in port, you're in the port, and you're like, he can't leave. He's going to poison everybody on the mainland. Fuck, shit, fuck. Don't let him out of here. You're just kind of like on your own the whole time. Like, you do a little ambush at the beginning, like with Ishikawa and Yuna and all those fuckers, and it's like, it's cool. But then they're like, Yuna's like, go on ahead. Like, you know, we'll take it from here, Buster. And that's it. You just like sneak around and you just like get to the Khan, and then you're like and then you get his health really low and he runs away, and then you chase him and then you just kind of kill him. It just felt a little, I was like, really? I was like, there were some really good missions in this game and some really great large scale moments. And I felt a little bit whelmed by the way that it concluded. Like, the final cutscene of him actually getting killed was like very cool. It was very powerful, yada, yada, yada. All the stuff you want me to say, I did feel that. But the mission itself, I thought was kind of like, I was like, Fucking took me forever to kill that guy too. Because you technically fight him twice, you know? And the first time when you're fighting him and he has the actual health bar and it's just you and him, I like got so pissed off, I turned the game off. I think I just like was watching some YouTube or something, and then I don't know, a little bit later, I like fired it back up. I was like, no, I'm killing this fucking guy before I go to sleep. And then guess who did? Yeah, it was me. It's cool. It was really cool. Did I already say the thing about sneaking around and you poison everybody? Yeah, I did say that. And then your uncle is like, you're literally not my kid. Like, I'm absolutely not adopting you. There's 0 chance of that. Okay, and then you sneak into Castle Shimura and you poison the milk. Another mission that took me fucking forever to do. The stealth missions in that game can be so damn finicky. But okay, I finally do it. I poison the milk. And then Shimura shows up and he's like, the Shogun is gonna, like, you're gonna get killed for this. You're 100% gonna go to samurai jail unless you blame Yuna for this. And you're like, hell no. Like, she didn't make me do this. I'm the ghost, bitch. I'm the ghost. That's literally me. I'm like the Wired autocomplete Reddit undercover. It's actually me, but I'm the motherfucking Ghost of Tsushima. That was what Jin was like. And then, okay, Shimura's like, all right, well, you're literally going to prison then. Get ready to learn prison, buddy, because that's where you're going. And then he did. Got some cool armor. I upgraded the, like your dad's armor, like your clan armor, with like the games logo on it, you know? And I upgraded it so I got like the antlers on my helmet. It honestly looks stupid as fuck. It's like just too blocky. It looks like a Roblox outfit. I don't really like it. But like what it is symbolically is really cool. Got some paint jobs for it. Stuff like that. Dude, Taka, what a stupid asshole he is. What a just dumb... Like nobody died in this game. Maybe there's a mission or two that I skipped that I just didn't get to because I was so focused. I don't know. Maybe I just missed something. But like the mission where Taka ends up dying, dog, I literally say to my girlfriend, when he like shows up, he's like, oh wait, he's like, I'm coming. Like, don't go without me. I wanted to help you out before we go back to the mainland. I say to my girlfriend, I'm like, oh, so his ass he's literally dead. He's like the Reddit undercover Wired autocomplete. It's actually me, but I'm actually dead. And then, yeah, it's exactly what happened. Because I said to her, I was like, there hasn't really been a death in this game yet, which is kind of weird that a game about like a full-scale invasion and like ethnic cleansing hasn't really had any main character deaths outside of the meaningless ones that happen at the beginning that we have no emotional attachment to those people on the beach. So like, who cares in that moment? And then what do they do? The first major character that gets killed is like a C-rate character of an A-rate character, like a sibling of theirs. And you're like, oh, okay. And then so who's the second most consequential character to die in this game? Your horse. And that's kind of it. Is there one that I'm missing? I don't think that there is. I just really don't. Everybody just kind of lives in this game. And so I named my horse Sora. That you break out of jail and they get harassed. It sucked. And then you have to get a new horse. And they're like, what do you want to name it? And we were like, Nobu. Shout out to the sushi place in what's that damn sushi place in Los Angeles where celebrities always hard launch? Is it Sushi House? With the where it has 2 floors and there's like a very specific railing. I think it's Sushi House. Someone out there is gonna one of you TMZ bitches out there. I think that's what it is. It's basically that, but like a horse, and then nobody else dies. Nobody else has. I was wondering if there was gonna be. I also was not that invested in like any of the characters, except Jin. Like Jin was awesome, and I saw a whole breakdown video of people being like, Jin versus Arthur Morgan from Red Dead Redemption. Like, who's the better protagonist? What? Like, huh? I will say it was cool. Jin smiled at the end of the game. There's like a cutscene right before you go and kill the Khan rather. The Kongol? Kongol? Is that a word? I think I'm making up a word. I think I'm mashing 2 words together. I think that's a hashtag up. Mash up. Nope. Fumbled that one. If you are listening to this on Spotify, be sure to rate 5 stars. If you're listening to this on YouTube, sure leave a like, subscribe. Nice little comment for the algorithm. Make sure to keep primary control in check. And I will catch you guys in the next one.
Beautiful. Primary control. Beautiful. Primary control. Beautiful. Primary control.